How to urinate with enough power to lift yourself off the ground. Ever since I was born, I've always thought about ways to improve myself both physically and mentally by gaining knowledge or by getting stronger and more flexible. When it comes to physical training, there's one part of your body most wouldn't train since it pretty much doesn't add anything to overall strength and aesthetics. But I did it anyways, because why not? I've always been obsessed with pushing the limits of how far I can wee-wee. From 2 meters to 10 meters to 20 meters, I kept pushing myself, even videoing the angle and trajectory of the piss stream so I could do some quick parabolic motion calculations and find out how much power I needed to get the bladder water another meter or so farther. I'd also measure the wind speed, temperature, and pressure just to make sure my air resistance calculations are right, but to make sure, I also hooked this data into a computer to simulate the scenario using computational fluid dynamics. Eventually, the simulations got so complicated that I had to buy a new graphics card for $6,000, but that's just not what this post is about. So after many trials of water shooting, I noticed a little kick every single time I sprinkle. Before I declare myself insane and head over to a mental hospital, I thought about it again and again until it dawned on me that every time I make it rain, it was generating thrust. I did a handstand on a bathroom scale while watching some anime corn to get my schlong up so it would stand up straight towards the ceiling before starting a storm. I was so ecstatic to find out the scale read a whole 12.3937819204329 grams heavier. To make sure it's not some stupid error, I did the same thing for a total of 5 trials, which fortunately proved that my readings are consistent. Oh, and there's also a great big hole in the ceiling, leading straight out through the roof and into the sunlight outside. I knew I could do better. I want to propel myself off the ground. Around December, I started to train the lower part of my body responsible for squeezing out the forbidden water, but whenever I was out of juice, I got creative and found out another alternative. Cream. By tying my hose shut while creaming, I could strengthen my joystick to the pressure of the urine. Day after day, I started to notice my love wand becoming thicker and more muscular until the entire thing is nothing but muscle. I'd say the veins adds a strange aesthetic to it, like pipes flowing into a rocket nozzle to deliver fuel, which is pretty neat. Eventually, I did some research on whether your skin flute is a muscle and discovered that it isn't. So am I really human? That's not an answer I'd want to answer at this time, so back to the training. Eventually, tying my one-eyed trouser snake shut didn't do anything as the pressures would force open the zip ties I used, but I had another idea. I jammed my phallus into a garden hose and turns on the flow. Instantly, I started feeling immense pressure inside my bladder, but I held tight, tensing every muscle in my body. The pain was so great I had to stop, but something is telling me this is going to work, so I continued doing it. I trained and trained, day after day, starting with lower pressure and increasing the pressure bit by bit. I'm now able to hold it perfectly without any struggle. On the 459th day, the hose sprung a leak due to the immense pressures, so I had to step up the game. Pressure washers. This is going to get dangerous. I started slow like always and worked up to the higher pressures until I capped out the pressure at around 3,500 psi or so. Eventually, I settled on another method. Water jet pumps. I scored one off eBay for $9,000 and got to work with how I'm going to connect it with my membrum virile. Like with the pressure washers, I started slow, progressing to higher pressures when I had the strength. At around 24,000 psi, I started to notice a decrease in my strength gains. Is this my limit? I tried cranking up the pressure even more to push myself further, but that's when I really fucked up. The pressure was so insane it tore through the thick muscles within my body, which I've trained hard in order to contain the insane pressure. It's all over. Or so I thought. Ever since I lost my dog to a madman wielding a 10 feet long metal pole back in August of 2022, I knew I had to be strong. I may be no match for a madman wielding a 10 feet long metal pole, but when it comes to someone I could fight evenly, no one fits the role better than myself. After a 3-month break, I was fully healed and ready to continue. The day I continued the training, I noticed my best chamber pressure was only a mere 9,400 psi, a far cry from the 24,000 psi personal best. It was clear that getting injured like that meant I'd never be able to attain a similar level of strength ever again. Eventually, I capped out at 19,200 psi, but learning from my mistake, I stopped going for more and only trained to maintain the strength. By this time, my creaming and rain producing does not look like anything that is physically possible by any living being on the planet. The liquids are now nothing more than superheated vapor escaping my orifice like gases expelled from the muzzle of a firearm, and if I were to duck most creatures, be it a human or something else, they'd explode and turn into a 100 m diameter cloud of finely shredded gore. My mushroom also looks nothing like any body part of any animal in existence. The muscle is so dense and firm that hitting it with a wrench makes it vibrate in a low-tone ring as if hitting solid tungsten. My pork sword has transcended its purpose as a sex organ and has now become a weapon, one so powerful that it could blow a hole through the skull of a Pachycephalosaurus with the gas pressure alone. I had no idea how much progress I've made, and there's only one way to find out. I drank a full gallon of water and waited for it to sink into my bladder. Pointing my wing wong towards the ground, I tensed my lower body. There was a sharp jolt of force as the thrust pushed deep into my body. The pain was bearable but very intense. In that fraction of a second, I kept pushing and pushing, and by the end of it, my feet was a few inches off the ground. Only a few inches, but it was worth it. I had achieved the impossible, but deep within I still craved for more. From all the studies I had, I knew jet propulsion is all about the velocity of the stuff flowing out, and to maximize it, I need a nozzle, which my man-made kinda is in a way, but it wasn't enough. I need a convergent-divergent nozzle. In a few moments, a brilliant idea came into my mind, and I rushed downstairs to fetch a chest set my grandpa left me when he passed away in 1991. Eyeing the pieces carefully, I picked the best one that seemed fit for the job, the king piece. The crown of the king piece made it possible to slip it into my old chap hole, while the rest of the piece formed a convergent-divergent shaped cavity inside. After a while of flexing my dipstick such that the muscles formed neatly around the entire piece, I got an idea of the shape and made sure to memorize it and practice holding it as much as possible. Weeks after, I'm now ready for the final performance. I've achieved not just the impossible, but something that isn't supposed to exist. With my baloney pony now holding that shape and my body full of juice, I flexed my body yet again, waiting for the familiar, pleasant feeling of rising into the air, but it was different. Hot steam exploded out of the convergent-divergent orifice as it scorches the ever-living shirt out of my thighs and feet, causing excruciating pain. As my body slowly rose into the air, my feet were now flapping wildly in the jet blast, completely shattered and disintegrated. The sound was deafening, but soon enough it would become as calm as a quiet night as my eardrums were pulverized. I'm now over 10 feet in the air and my greatest dream has come true, but it was about to get even better. Below the nozzle lip that was my crank, I could see them. 5 perfect, eye-wateringly, tip-throbbingly beautiful mock diamonds, which I had way too little time to enjoy as I've ran out of bladder soda, thus, no more thrust was being generated. It is approximately 10 minutes after I fell back to the ground. My legs are burned and shattered beyond recognition. I'm feeling a little sleepy at the moment, so before I go, I've decided to detail this incredible journey for you guys to read as I may not have the chance to do it again. Good night, and remember that whenever something feels impossible, never give up. Like and follow also what the food.